This is Deborah Atkinson, and you are watching the very first beta recording on video. So, I've done an audio podcast for ugh, 9 years, but I've got two podcasts, one for fitness professional and health coaches, and one for you, Living 50. And I know some of you personal trainers and health coaches are lurking out there too, so you should actually be listening to the other one. I hope you are, to grow your business and be here to learn a little bit more about hormone balancing, exercise prescription, and all the things we do here to support women in menopause. Let's dive in. All right. First of all, I guess I have to tell you. So I do these fairly early in the morning. So this is me in the raw. This is potentially part of the benefit of doing audio only. So rarely to do work behind the scenes do I put on mascara and brush my hair, although it wouldn't matter because I've got one of these helmets on. I started 8 and 9 years ago wearing one of these. And then I got away from it and I would just use, the earbuds. And yet the control here is never as good. And these things seem to go bad when you least expect it. So, long story. Here we go. We're talking about visceral belly fat. At one time in my career, 37 years this year, it was something that required an explanation. So back in the 90s and the early 2000s, we began talking about it as the low and the non-fat era gave way to increasing obesity numbers. It was when we were first discovering the fact that by eating, no fat, high carb, those whole bags of cookies and chips, that we were getting fatter and fatter because we were eating carbohydrates that were low in no fat, that it wasn't actually fat that's the culprit. So, and many of us have a hard time shaking that because it's what we learned at one point, and I get it. But we had to still educate at that point. We began talking about that. And those obesity numbers were not just in adults, they were in children. And we're still seeing that. This is one of the first times when we begin saying this, probably 14, 15 years ago. At this time, I was doing a radio show weekly for a business that I worked for. And it's when we begin saying that, this is the first time in history when parents actually may outlive their children. Sad, but true. And we're still there right now. So now, here we are, many women who never have experienced a problem with visceral belly fat, maybe just muffin top, that pinch and inch, or baby weight, are finding that menopause and postmenopause has not been kind to their waist measurement. I'm Deborah Atkinson. You're listening and potentially watching. I don't know what will happen in post production. The Flipping 50 show, where I address your top and mine concerns and struggles and hopefully inspire you. And I share what to eat, how to move, and how to change your mindset often about those two things so you can have the energy and the vitality that you want, need, and deserve in the second and better half. It is Heart Health Month in February while I'm recording this live. So I'm tackling related topics and giving tips all month. So I'm popping into our Facebook page, and I'll link to that if you're not already there, regularly to answer questions and just share tips, small, short tips for just every day, making sure that you've got it right, that you're not operating on that. Well, this is what I've heard years ago, or I've heard it for years even, because let's face it, we all go on and we ask Dr. Google questions, but it's so dangerous because anybody with a PC, anybody with their own private computer can put information online. And because we see it in print, yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus, you may believe everything that you see because it looks and people use URLs like Science Daily that could be written by anybody, but there's no necessarily study or research behind it. So be careful, my friends. But I'm popping in to give you tips that are science based. This whole show, is about visceral belly fat, and it's an important one and related to menopause to your fitness and to your future. So here we go. Before we dive in, this month is sponsored. And this episode, actually, but all month is sponsored by my very own Fit You program. Losing weight, specifically fat weight, for women is different than men. And after 50 and menopause, it's different than prior to it. And it's different if you have 20 pounds to lose than if you've got a couple. The program, Fit You, does all the research for you. Not the heavy lifting, unfortunately, that's you, girlfriend. And like every Flipping 50 program, the research and the protocol behind the program featured women in menopause or beyond. I'll link to it in the show notes. This month, enrollment is open for 50% off with a bonus metabolism makeover for those who get in early. So hurry. And it's also got a bonus intermittent fasting component to boost your program results if intermittent fasting is appropriate for you and if you need support figuring out how do I do it, where do I start, and what might I be doing wrong if it's not working. All right. What and why now is visceral belly fat a concern for you and I? Visceral belly fat can accumulate easier in women post-menopause, and reduced estrogen levels are a primary reason. But read on for more. So I'm going to go into depth over and over, and you're going to feel potentially, or at least I do, like I'm repeating myself, but I think that's actually a great way to teach. So I'm going to try to write that out. Visceral belly fat poses a greater heart health risk and may release more free fatty acids, we know those as FFAs, into your bloodstream, as well as inflammation causing hormones. So I've shared many times in many places that there is nada, zero correlation between menopause and weight gain. I know, that's hard to hear. In a study of over 1 million women, it was published by ACOG in 2018, it was clear that body composition changes were not related to menopause changes. However, clearly, many women gain weight in midlife. Why? Well, the reasons are integrated and layered, and you could say complicated, but they're actually quite simple. So, number one, reduced activity. And I mean both in terms of exercise, where you and I would say, okay, let's lace up the shoes, let's go for a walk, let's go lift the weights, let's go do a jog, let's get on the elliptical trainer or the bike and get our heart rate up and breathe hard and sweat, right? That's exercise. But also, we've reduced our daily movement, just walking, moving. Life is very convenient right now. And dare I say, right now in the pandemic, we're restricted. We're not traveling. We're potentially not even going to office buildings where we had to go. We had to commute from the parking lot to the office. We had to walk around the office, up and down the stairs in the office. There's less of those kinds of incidental things going on. You're not necessarily going to the mall as freely as you did. You're not going to the grocery store. For all those trips, you're being a little bit more organized to reduce exposure. So that's definitely a factor. And even in other times, pre-pandemic, and once we return to a new place of where we've got more freedom again, we still, because of convenience, remote controls, and the way we live in contemporary lifestyles, we move less unless we're conscious about it. We also have increased social eating and drinking at midlife. We've got a little bit more freedom. We're a little bit more relaxed. It's a big part of our social life for many of us. Insomnia, caused potentially by hormonal changes. By itself, insomnia is a problem because if you're not sleeping, you're not getting the right kind of hormonal TLC that you need in order to make any exercise or eating healthy that you might be doing actually take for you to get the benefit. And that insomnia has a secondary impact. It causes the lack of physical activity or poor choices in nutrition the following day. If you wake up, as many women do, with coffee, you say good night with alcohol, and you're dehydrated in between from each of those things and just from not drinking as much water. Those things are also concerns. I think I just saw a dish towel on Saturday afternoon. I was doing a little walking around. I think it was the first time that I've ever shopped since the pandemic started. I mean, literally leisurely in a mask, but doing a little strolling. There was a dish towel that said, you know, coffee, you're done. Wine, you're up, right? And, it's a way too true for way too many women. It's relying on them to do things that, hormone balance would actually do for you for natural energy. There are changes in gut health and, our observance, yours potentially, of outdated healthy habits that make those gut issues worse. And gut issues are often come along with hormonal changes. Your gut and your hormones are very closely intertwined. And then there's a loss of muscle, somewhat from reduced activity. You're not necessarily exercising correctly. And potentially those outdated health habits may include you don't realize how much protein you actually need or when you need it. What can you do? So, to combat those changes in the habits that you've got so that you can combat the visceral health or deal with it and eliminate it if you've got it, to improve your fat burning, you want to exercise. I'm going to talk more specifically on that, but you do want to exercise, and we'll come back to it. Remove your stressors. And we can't all do that. We can't all remove all of them, right? There are people, there are situations, because you're a business owner, there are always going to be stressors. But even that statement removes some of the stress. When you see it coming, when you know technology is going to break, it becomes less of a problem. Nobody is dying or bleeding. And I say that tongue in cheek, but that's a good rule of thumb. And when you've been through a tragedy, as my family has, and many of you who've been with me for 4 or 5 years know this, that, when you go through a terrible, terrible tragedy, suddenly things that used to be just major stressors would set you off because they were imperfections. They just don't matter nearly as much, and you can get through those. But removing a stressor is one way to do it. Using adaptogens, which we'll talk a little bit more about, but not so much in this episode. Those are herbal kinds of medicines that are not in themselves hormones, but that can support your own hormone function and behavior. And ergogenic aids. So boosting your ability to burn fat by coffee, number one, or caffeine in any way you've taken it is also an ergogenic aid. Now, there's some healthier ways to do it, and I can point you to a blog post. It's not been released yet when this is brand new, but it will be released on February, 18th, I believe is the date, Thursday of this week. And I did a taste test on Mashta, and you may want to tune into that because it became something that I had not expected it to become. More than taste, on quality, on the ability of it to dissolve and stir it up, and so many things. All right. And also to improve your fat burning, you can start eating at the right time and the right type of food. Yeah, it's got a lot to do with how does your body use it or not. And then to decrease your fat storage, here's what you can do. So, almost stating talk about stressors in an opposite way. You've got to fix your cortisol coping. So we can't get rid of it, all of it, but you can improve your joy, your laughter, your hugs, maybe on a limited basis. So don't know about you, but I live alone. There's not a lot of hugging going on right now, but I've got a four-legged friend, and that too reduces your stress level and theirs. So go ahead, have a pet and avoid dehydration. make sure that you're drinking adequately. So quick tip is, how much do you need? It's actually about half of your body weight in pounds in ounces. So if you weigh 130, 65 ounces is your goal. But here's what you don't read behind the scenes. If you've been regularly drinking about 20 ounces a day, you don't jump to 65 being your goal. You would jump to maybe, okay, I was at 20. Now regularly I'm going to shoot for 25 ounces every day. Let your body adapt very slowly, and it will keep you out of the bathroom even at night. Reducing or eliminating temporarily alcohol. So right now it's not your friend. Could it be again? Sure. And yet, if you're battling visceral belly fat and drinking, more than one drink a day on average, and for the women that I work with, going dry, it certainly will help you because your body is metabolizing that just like it was sugar. So if you can, every glass you're going to drink, imagine you're spooning white table sugar into your mouth. It's about that equivalent. Reduce your insulin spike at meals. So this also really lends itself to what we just talked about in terms of alcohol, because that's what happens. And I'll talk more about insulin spikes and why they're so negative and detrimental to you. But that means the kind of carbohydrates that you're choosing to eat and when you choose to eat them needs to be really thoughtful. So if you are doing a high carbohydrate breakfast, I will point out to you why that's so devastating. But if you're having high carbs at dinner, I would actually suggest that. But it's the kind of carbs you're having that either is going to help or hurt you. Eat early and not late for fasting so that insulin spike is higher when you eat later in the day, and it will stop fat burning. More again on that in a bit. So you also want to avoid using whey protein. Now, a lot of the women that I've been working with for the last, 8 years, maybe even more than that, I've been talking about needing protein post workout. However, the rules have changed. And the rules for you, my dear, in midlife have changed even more. We don't want that easy to digest protein at any other time than pre or post a workout. A fairly intense one. I don't mean a walk around the block with the dog, specifically an old dog. No offense, Truman. But the point is, it's important that first you realize whey is dairy, and a lot of women are finding that causes inflammation and joints hurts, gut issues, bloating, gas, and you don't know why because you've always had it. And so you think, no, I don't have a problem with that because you're not associating it with that until you know what you didn't know. But a whey protein or a high carbohydrate, easy to digest protein shake, if it's not away from your workouts, and I would say whey, never, don't do it if you're a midlife woman, your blood sugar will spike. And then that fat that results because of an insulin spike will get stored instead of used, not what you're after. So, our protein shakes, a big part of what I do, absolutely. However, I do a specific kind, and yes, disclaimer, shout, Flipping 50 has its own because many women don't realize the quality that they need, the things they don't want in that protein shake, as opposed to also what they do. So let's go into exercise details. I promised I would come back to that. You want to do high intensity early and follow it with protein. So the number 2 of 10, Flipping 50 tenets is intense early, light late. So anything that gets you breathless, takes you to muscular fatigue earlier in the day is going to be better. And follow that with protein. You want to alternate. I say, and I'm an advocate, and there's no reason why physically, if you feel good, you can't combine, do interval training and then do strength, or do strength and interval training on the same day. Mixing them up, a few minutes of intervals, a few minutes of strength, bad idea. If you're a female in midlife or beyond and you want to boost your metabolism, fast way to an injury, slow way to any muscular lean gains that actually change your metabolism. And you're moving so rapidly with things like that that you have no control. You're not getting better. You're not getting better function. Just moving in a craze. You're exhausted, but not better at the end. Not a great idea. So I suggest you alternate strength and your HIIT workouts. And I suggest that because then it gives you something that is of high intensity every day. And if you can do that, the calories you burn in it are not the piece that's important. It's how many calories you burn afterward as your body is doing what we call a payback. It's like you took a loan out while you were exercising, and your body has to pay back the oxygen and the repairs that have to happen. And that happens for hours after exercise. So the more times you do that during the week, but that dance between doing the work and taking the rest and recovery, also super important. So next, you want to change your focus. So although you have visceral belly fat, so many people, including myself, will talk about, we just have, well, how do I burn that fat, right? How do I improve my fat burning? Change your focus. Change your focus away from burning the fat and change it to gaining lean muscle. So inevitably, you don't have necessarily a fat problem. You have a lack of muscle problem, and you need to get on that, girl. So right now, if you want to reduce your visceral belly fat or any type of belly fat, more lean muscle supports that. And more lean muscle that you put on right now means that in 10 and in 20 and in 30 years, you're going to get up out of your own chair, potentially still be in your own house, fixing your own dinner, doing your own laundry, taking your own bath, wiping your own bottom, all the things that I don't know about you, but that is what I think about. I honestly, I don't worry about Alzheimer's so much. However, I worry about, who's going to take care of me, and I do not want that burden on anyone. I want to be able to take care of myself, have the strength in order to do it, and leave this planet in my sleep. So it's been said. All right. So let's talk a little bit about, resistance training and protein timing. So those ways to change your focus and increase that lean muscle tissue. Basically, you want to look at the combination of them. So resistance training can increase your lean muscle tissue. Adding more protein, adequate protein, can support that lean muscle tissue. When you add the resistance training and the right timing of the right type of protein, you have a 2-for-1 that is not like 1 and 1 equals 2. It's like 1 and 1 equals 4. It's fantastic for aging, for preventing frailty. That results in falls. That results in fractures. So it's a domino effect, but here's the benefit for visceral belly fat specifically. You will improve your blood sugar stabilization and that intake or uptake of glucose. So you will have a better metabolism. And for those people, proof is in the pudding, who have diabetes and are on insulin, generally when they start exercising, if that wasn't a part of their routine, it generally wasn't, before they got type 2 diabetes, when they start working out and exercising, they need to coordinate that really well with their practitioner to monitor, because often the need for the insulin goes down with blood sugar stabilization. And guess what? When you can improve your blood sugar levels and therefore your need for insulin or your insulin sensitivity improves, the side effects are all good ones. There are negative side effects for any kind of medication that you're taking. So the more you can reduce that, the better you're going to feel, right? Okay, let's talk about the science of visceral belly fat and insulin resistance. Generally, insulin resistance causes higher insulin and blood sugar levels. So, what does that mean? People who have visceral belly fat, they're storing it here, have a greater tendency to have insulin resistance. Now, what does that mean? So, it takes, when blood sugar spikes after a meal, it goes up, and it goes up in proportion to the amount of sugars at that meal. So if you have a higher fat, higher protein, it's why keto is so popular but doesn't necessarily work as is for women in midlife. You want to pay attention to what is actually happening at the insulin level. So here's what happens. The blood sugar goes up after a meal, however much. So hopefully you're eating carefully and you know what that is. Insulin goes up to lower that blood sugar level. But when insulin is in your bloodstream, there is fat storage going on. There's no fat burning. So, not ideal, right? So, we want to keep the lowest amount of insulin possible because until that insulin comes back down after a meal, and the higher it goes up, the longer it takes to go down, you're only in fat storage mode. It's all your body can do. It cannot both burn and store. It's only going to store, store, store. So, if you have a high carbohydrate meal, and I'll give you a great example in just a little bit, and you'll think, oh my gosh, I thought that was healthy. Maybe. Okay. 1980 called and wants that one back. But here's what we're going to do. So the more you resist, the more insulin resistance you have, and the heavier you get, and the more visceral belly fat you have, the more that's true. Your body will say, I've got to make more and more and more insulin, more and more insulin, more and more fat storage. So, what is the answer to that? So, let me explain. The main cause of elevated free fatty acids, and we get that when you have that visceral belly fat, they're in your bloodstream. We don't want that. The main culprit is generally eating too many calories and then carrying excess body fat, specifically visceral. Listen to this. So, if you're having a low fat breakfast of a bagel and fruit, say after a cup of coffee, you've gone from your lowest blood sugar in a 24-hour period. In any 24-hour period, when you wake up in the morning, you've been sleeping overnight. And I know you feel like, well, I've not been burning any calories. Doesn't matter. Your body's doing a lot of repair overnight for your brain and your body both, and it requires fuel. So you're burning quite a bit of fat overnight, but your blood sugar level's at an all-time low. So what you first put into your body is really important. So you've gone from that lowest blood sugar in a 24-hour period of time to a rapid spike, because carbohydrates go like, whoa, thank you so much, right? You're on this high, and yet they will be followed by a rapid spike in your insulin, and that's going to take hours to come down. But meanwhile, you are primed for fat storage for hours and a crash, because what goes up must come down, right? The blood sugar is going to come back down, even though the insulin is still, I'm still doing my job, storing fat for you. You're likely to repeat your mistake when you start your day like that, because you will want another hit. I mean, it is like a sugar rush for your body that it got from that fruit and that bagel. They're like crack. So listen to this. You've never had this visceral belly fat problem before? Well, okay. What do you do about it? What are the solutions? So, number one, no high carb breakfast. Really minimal carbohydrate breakfast. Your body is, or should be, getting started with cortisol. Cortisol is the energy hormone. Remember that. So it's higher, or should be, at about 8 a.m. than at any other time of day. We do not need carbs for breakfast. Starting with that bowl of cereal, starting with pancakes, starting with waffles, starting with bagels, starting with toast. Bad, bad, and bad. You can have a small amount of them. You can have about one serving of carbs is all you need. But you also want to make sure these are not white flour. Potentially, they're not anything that's food sensitivity for you. They're high in protein. You want a breakfast high in protein and a little bit higher in fat as well, higher in fiber. Those things are going to help you boost the optimal fat burning all day long, keep you more full. We call it satiety level. So you're not getting hungry. You can go for hours, and that elevation of blood sugar, very low, because it was high protein, high fat, very low carbohydrate. So what happens with insulin? Also very low, comes right back down. You're burning fat. Then hours later, 2 or 3, really takes about 3 to 4. So between breakfast and lunch, you can go into fat burning mode. If you have high carbohydrate breakfast, you probably can't. In fact, you may not be able to make it through the morning without a snack or coffee. because you're going to crash. It's just the way it is. It's always been that way in your 20s, your 30s, and your 40s. But right now, you don't have the hormones that can cope with that. There's a narrow road you're driving on right now. You were on a wider one, but not so much anymore. Okay. So even for those of you who've never had this problem before, like I never had this belly fat, certainly not like this, the visceral belly fat. And let me just make sure that you understand this is not pinch an inch. This is not your pants are a little bit too tight. This is really like Santa Claus belly. Like it's tight and taut. You have visceral belly fat weaving and woven around your internal organs. Doesn't sound very good, does it? It's not. So here are the risks. What are the solutions for visceral belly fat? To exercise for visceral belly fat, you want strength training and some high intensity exercise, along with some low intensity walking. Or if walking isn't it, you're thinking, well, I can't walk because of ankles or knees, or you're thinking, I can't walk because it's below zero, right? Or, you know, I now have to say because it's 120, and actually you can. You can get up early, you can go in the evening, and you can get hot and you can still go. But you want to make sure that you're doing some kind of low intensity exercise, and ideally that you enjoy. Outdoors is best. Not always possible depending on where you are. You can dance around in your living room if you cannot go for a walk. You can do walking videos, and they really are nothing more than low impact aerobic dance videos from the 1980s. That'll work if you enjoy it. That's a big piece. You want to reduce your impact, but do high intensity exercise. Because why? Well, because if you have visceral belly fat, you've probably put on 20 pounds or more, right? And we know that that weight, every 10-pound increment is harder on your joints. And that's not a good thing to be doing high impact on because it will do damage eventually. And we've got, replacement parts are a possibility today, but, it's certainly easier to keep the ones you came with. So treat them well. You want also to seek physical activity that improves and provides you with energy versus injury. So, quick fixes, rapid, going to go to this boot camp and work like crazy, with someone who does not know what you need as far as intensity and exercise and isn't testing you specifically and talking to you about what's going on for you. How about eating for visceral belly fat? First of all, you want to remove the foods that are known food sensitivities to test them for yourself. Don't take somebody's word for it, and don't just remove them and say, okay, good, I'm feeling better, because you very potentially might, but you also are cutting out micronutrients that you cannot do permanently without accounting for them some other way and knowing how is that going to affect me long term if I take out all the grains and I'm not getting very many B vitamins. What would happen to me, right? Well, you wouldn't cope with stress very well, but those B vitamins are kind of important. So you've got to really think about the purpose is not removing them to remove them permanently. The purpose is removing them to bring them back one at a time to test them to see if I can't have that. Why can't I? What's the underlying reason? What can I do to help that and fix the root problem? And if I'm removing it, what do I need to substitute in my diet so I've got something else in there or supplement with to make sure I've covered all my bases for micronutrient sufficiency? Because listen, your metabolism cannot work if you're operating without all the parts, right? Super important to remember. I just don't do that. I don't eat that. I don't eat this. That is somewhat irresponsible where it comes to your body and the energy that you want and the way that you want to look. So also will tell you substitute other foods. So don't make, when you do an elimination phase of a diet, don't make that a low calorie diet. It's not what it's about. So if you remove dairy, where you typically had creamy dressings and ranch dressing, or you had cream in your coffee, well, substitute something made with cashew, quote unquote, cheese. Soaked cashews can make great dressings, great salad dressings and sauces, and you can substitute coconut milk potentially or coconut cream for creamer in your coffee. The goal is not to reduce the diet. It's to find out what's the effect of those foods on your gut. Eliminate your snacks, however, and realize that coffee and sweetener or cream in your coffee early in the day, your body thinks that's breakfast. So I know many of you might think, well, I don't eat anything until noon. But if you've had coffee and cream, you've eaten. You've had something with calories. Your body said, oh, okay, that's breakfast. So what is it? It's a little ketogenic, meaning it's high fat, very low carb. But still, if your body needs food, you're due for protein. You need something in that body going without protein for several meals, and doing that on a regular basis could be decreasing the amount of lean muscle that you're able to put in. So you've got to think really closely about that. I would define an eating window, and that means if you're doing intermittent fasting, you're doing that with purpose. Define it. Don't accidentally do it. Nobody accidentally fasts, okay? Relearn what is healthy food for you and the amount of protein that you need in your diet. Most women are far undershooting the amount of protein that they need. And increase your fiber. If you want to find a way to easily stay full, stop your cravings, you're going to combine high protein and high fiber, gradually increasing your fiber. Don't go jumping in there too high. Decrease or eliminate your alcohol until you've made progress. So I covered that one earlier. It bears repeating. Okay. Sleeping for visceral belly fat. And this will be the last biggest tip. But as I talked about eating, I talked about exercise, sleeping, and we could talk about stress. We could talk about where you put the rest between your exercise. There's a lot of pieces in You Still Got It, Girl, the book, that I could throw in here. But these are the most important. Sleep quality can be improved from getting the right exercise at the right time and the right eating at the right time. So there is a time of day when you have those carbohydrates that best support your sleep. Did you know? And your bedtime routines and your wake up routines are oh so important. And there are almost 24, at least 20 tips that I give about sleep that could support what it is that you need. And I'll put a resource for Sleep Yourself Skinny where I share those. And if you've got You Still Got It, Girl, there's an entire chapter in there. Great contributing author in Dr. Michael Bruce, who is known as the Sleep Doctor. You'll see him frequently on today's show, Good Morning America. He's kind of America's sleep expert. Let's dive into science studies that reveal health truths. So, everything I do is backed by science. So this is not opinion here. I certainly have one, but it's got to be based on science and not just speculation. So this studies that I love, are all a lot of people tested. Of course, you and I, right? So we're talking menopause or postmenopause. And over long periods of time, those are longitudinal tests. So we study people for years and years. The Nurses Health Study, it's one of the largest and longest, both things that scream, pay attention. Those studies to date that has measured abdominal obesity and looked at the relationship between your waist size and death from heart disease or cancer or any cause in middle-aged women. So at the start of the study, all 44,000 subjects were healthy and had measured their waist and their hip size. Okay, now after 16 years, and I want to pause here for a moment. So I know that the title teased a little bit. It's not all about skinny jeans. And maybe you thought I was going to just give you the, how do you look good and get into those back of the closet clothes. And although that is a part of it, and for many of us, that is our immediate motivation. That is what we want more than anything today and for Saturday. But we also want to be here to appreciate it in 5 and in 10 years. And we are laying the foundation for our futures related to heart disease, related to cancer, related to Alzheimer's right now. So be thinking, in that way. So let's dive back in here. So, in this nurses' health study, after 16 years of following those 44,000 subjects, women who had reported the highest waist sizes, and that is 35 inches or higher, that number's important to you, and I'll tell you why. They had nearly double the risk of dying from heart disease compared to women who had reported the lowest waist sizes, less than 28 inches. Even women with normal weight BMI, now many of you know that BMI is not my favorite, body mass index, because that is just a height weight ratio and it doesn't include body fat versus someone who's got much more muscle and could ultimately be healthier. However, BMI is still important. Even women with normal BMI, that's less than 25, with larger than 35-inch waists, had 3 times the risk of normal weight women whose waists were smaller than 35 inches. So outside of BMI, it is that number. It's somewhat magical. It's not the only study. That big study was not the only one that found similar relationships between abdominal fatness and death in normal weight women. The Shanghai Women's Health Study also did, and that one is also a fairly famous or infamous study. So, why is it that abdominal obesity is so much riskier than fat on your hips or elsewhere? You may be asking. The fat surrounding, remember it's marbled fat, basically, the fat surrounding your liver and other abdominal organs is very metabolically active. It releases, we talked about earlier, the fatty acids and inflammatory agents and hormones that ultimately lead to higher LDL cholesterol. And many of you listening will notice that over years, if you've seen a pattern, you've got your result, you're looking at your cholesterol level, never had a problem with it, and now you do. Your LDL, that's your lousy or bad cholesterol level, goes up. And you're struggling a little bit potentially to bring that HDL up, which is the good one to counter it. Triglycerides, also a part of your cholesterol. You may see that changing somewhat because of hormones and menopause. Blood glucose and blood pressure. So those hormone changes because of the visceral belly fat lead to higher LDL, higher triglycerides, higher blood glucose, and higher blood pressure. Bad, 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 and bad. Abdominal obesity measures. How do you do that? So I would love for you to go and do this. If you don't know and you've never done it, now hopefully I'm preaching to the choir. Many of you listening are Flipping 50 members and you're in programs where every 12 weeks we're asking you to do the pre-test and the post-test. Let's take a look at it. And part of the reason is to make you pay attention that those 2 time a week strength training workouts and those interval workouts are not just about, oh, I got it, I didn't get it, I'll try to fit it in. It's either leading you to or away from risk in many places. So the American Heart Association and the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, both of those agencies use waist circumference, that 35 inches, as their measure of abdominal obesity. The International Diabetes Federation uses also waist circumference, 31.5 inches. Okay, so think about that. More of us probably are coming closer to that one than to 35 even. And then last but not least, one more agency, the World Health Organization, uses waist to hip ratio to determine, abdominal obesity measurement. So just to help you, and this will be in the show notes as well, but I would highly recommend right now, put this on pause, or after you've listened, go back home, finish that walk or workout, and do measurements. And here's how to do them. So, both in terms of just doing your waist measurement, you do that at the smallest part of the waist. If you're measuring and calculating your waist and waist to hip ratio, you will also then do your measurement at the largest part of your hips, and that's usually the widest part of your butt. What you want to do is ideally have somebody else do it for you or do it in front of a full length mirror So you can see that you're doing this parallel to the floor because really easy for it to get caught up on something. And, if it's looking like a roller coaster, you're not getting an accurate measure. So do it as best you can. Don't hold your breath, just be relaxed and normal. And then know that that's how I'm going to do that again next time. And just hold it taut, no slack. So don't pull it tight. You've got to just do it the same every time. Otherwise, there's a little error due to you, the measurement. Okay. Okay. And then what you're going to do is if you've got waist and hip, you're going to divide your waist measurement by your hip measurement. Divide the smallest by the largest. That gives you your ratio. Remember, you want to be less than 0.85. So start looking at that. Okay. Juggling the challenge of multiple needs. So getting rid of that visceral belly fat, in terms of eating, nutrition, I mean, that's on one level, potentially harder because it's habit change, lifestyle, getting that message through. But the exercise, also we've got to be conditioned to get the exercise fitted in, but there's more going on. It's not just weight. Number one, it's fat that we want to lose. It's not just belly fat, it's the visceral belly fat. And it's not just about skinny jeans, it's about your long term health. On all counts, I think we can agree on all of those pieces. The question is, how do I exercise and eat pre and post exercise to support better hormonal function without causing more pain to joints or injury to areas where you're already vulnerable? That's the question. You've got knees or hips or feet, maybe ankles, that don't care for impact or severe flexion. You've got a need to stimulate those major muscle groups and still provide TLC for the joints that connect them. I hear you. I've been working with midlife women and older adults for decades. And here's the thing personally, I've got ankles and prior injuries too, but they don't stop me. They may prevent me from doing some of the things that I used to think I love to do that. I'm devastated because I can't do that as much as I want to anymore. But when there is one thing that doesn't work, generally there are usually three that will, whether we're talking one exercise or one mode of activity. There's something that will work for you. As a medical exercise specialist and a hormone balancing fitness expert, I don't isolate. And I know you need an integrated approach. If you've got visceral belly fat, chances are good that you have 20 or more pounds to lose. And chances are that that's stress to your joints that makes your exercise choices need to be thoughtful and not random. So, support if you need it. I created Fit You to use boxing movements for intervals at home without equipment for women who are carrying extra weight, who probably have knees, hips, ankles, potentially shoulders that are problematic. I alternate boxing workouts in the program with strength training. And I have a nutrition and a mindset component, both to this do it yourself program. And I hop into a Facebook group and answer your questions live every Sunday afternoon. It's 50% off right now because it's Heart Health Month. Plus, there is a bonus metabolism makeover that sold out last April at the beginning of the pandemic. That is a value of $6.99. Plus, you get support using intermittent fasting if you're just starting or if you want to optimize your exercise and your fasting timing to lose the fat and keep the muscle. I'll link to Fit You in the show notes. There are a limited number of the bonuses, the metabolism makeover and the fasting available. So just know that the special enrollment and fasting component offer ends February 28th of 2021. Fit You may be available at the time you're listening if you're coming back much later, but the bonuses are only good this month. There you have it. I will link to resources that I've used to compile the data in this program in the show notes. And you'll find the place where you can add comments or your questions at flipping50.com/visceral belly fat. What are you waiting for? The world needs you at your best right now. Certainly, your world does. So let's start flipping 50 together.